Hi everyone, welcome back. So if you saw my last video, I had said at the very end that I was going to split it up into two. So this is the second part of that last video. If this is the first video you're watching, essentially I just started a YouTube channel, but the first thing I decided to do was this series on the comments I got on this post I had written about my feelings around shot credentials and how they're going to be incredibly divisive and they're going to allow for medical segregation, and that's not the road we want to go down. And I got a bunch of really kind of nasty comments from people, and I decided to, unrelated to that, to make a YouTube channel. And I decided, my first series is going to be, how about I respond to those comments that I got on my respectful, well-written post about shot credentials. And so I'm going to dive right into those last two comments. Yes. And I have to give this comment props because it is the first and one of the few comments that does not directly attack me or assume that I am an awful individual because I am anti-shot passports. This comment says, the reality is we do need at least 70% of everyone we interact with to have it, and by it I assume this person means the shot. I don't know because I had to end up blocking them, so I don't know. But the reality is we do need at least 70% of everyone we interact with to have it, or the virus is not going to stop. The CDC isn't saying vaccination stops the spread because there is still 5% of vaccinated people who will be unknowingly spreading the virus if they don't wear a mask. Okay, that last part, the 5%, I don't know where they got that or even what they're saying. I've never seen that number, and I really don't know. Are they saying of all the people who get vaccinated, 5% of them are going to not wear a mask and thus continue to spread the disease? Or are they saying that out of everyone who's fully vaccinated and then later goes on to not wear a mask, 5% of them will spread it? I don't know what they're saying. Are they blaming the virus or the vaccines or the people for not wearing masks? I really don't know on that last part. But this idea of 70% of everyone we interact with has to have it, the shot, or the virus is not going to stop. I wanted to touch on that, even though this is not a personal attack, and this is, I don't think scientifically based or factual, but it's totally something that is well within your right to leave a comment on if it's what you believe. But I just would wonder, where did you get this information? With herd immunity, what's really interesting about that is that the WHO actually changed their definition of herd immunity last year. And there's been kind of rumors going around online that it was done in secret. I don't really think it was done in secret. I think it's more along the lines of one of those things where it was done and then it wasn't brought to the public's attention, and the media either didn't know about it or chose not to cover it. And so nobody really knew about it. It was kind of one of those things of like, oh, the CDC says now actually you can't really catch it from touching things. I mean, you can, but it's so minimal. It's not really a risk of spreading it. And yet nobody really knows that. It wasn't really publicized. So we see a bunch of businesses still investing time and money and resources into spraying everything down and sanitizing everything when that's not actually helping. And in fact, in some cases, it might be doing more harm than good. So it was just kind of one of those things, in my opinion, where it was done not necessarily in secret, but it wasn't publicized. So in June of last year, on the WHO website, herd immunity was defined as the indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when a population is immune, either through vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. This means that even people who haven't been infected or in whom an infection hasn't triggered an immune response, they are protected because people around them who are immune can act as buffers between them and an infected person. The threshold for establishing herd immunity for COVID-19 is not yet clear. Well, by November of last year, the definition of herd immunity on the same page on the WHO website had changed. It said this: herd immunity, also known as population immunity, is a concept used for vaccination, in which a population can be protected from a certain virus if a threshold of vaccination is reached. Herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. So Obviously, the first definition included vaccination and also natural immunity within this idea of herd immunity. Even though it's still recognized, we don't know what percentage of the population we need for herd immunity from COVID. And then the second definition switched to herd immunity is just based on vaccination, just based on the percentage of the people in a population who are vaccinated. And it still didn't offer like what percentage we need in the context of COVID. But I thought that was interesting. You know, and I've said this a bunch in previous videos, we don't know how long immunity lasts from natural immunity. We don't know. So you might say, well, then no, we shouldn't be counting natural immunity in terms of herd immunity. But we also don't know whether the shots that we're pushing offer immunity. And if they do, we don't know how long that immunity lasts. Like I mentioned previously, we don't know. Are people who've been fully vaccinated later testing positive for C19 because their immunity has waned? How often do we need booster shots? We don't know right now. So why are we not considering the fact that probably a good portion of the population does have natural antibodies circulating in their systems right now? And why are we not testing for that? Why are we not including that in this idea of herd immunity? I understand how ethically it could be unwise to say, well, we need to expose everyone to the virus in order to achieve herd immunity. I do understand why that is unethical, but why is that unethical in terms of people who have a really low risk for negative outcomes of C19? Why? Why couldn't we help isolate the vulnerable population and help make sure that those people are supported financially, and those people are the ones receiving EDD and receiving stimulus money, and those people are the ones who we help support emotionally and televisit and whatever else that entails. And then everyone else, all the younger people, all the healthier individuals, those who are not at high risk for C19, those people get back to work and get back to their lives. And yes, the virus does circulate in that population, but those people aren't going to overwhelm the healthcare system. Why was that never something that was discussed? Is that unethical? Or does that bring us to herd immunity sooner? And this idea herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. Again, I understand how that is ethical in terms of people who are at really high risk of serious outcomes from C19, but it just kind of makes me chuckle, because, not really chuckle, but as I recall it, when we first encountered this in March of last year and this 15 days to slow the spread, the messaging around that, as I recall it, was, look, this thing is so contagious, we're all probably going to get it at some point. There's no denying that. But we can't get it all at once. We can't overwhelm the healthcare system. So we all just need to pull together briefly and make sure that we're limiting our contact with other individuals so we all don't get sick at once. And I've said this before, not in videos, just to anyone who will listen. Somehow, very subtly, I'm not going to say in secret, but very subtly and really cleverly, that messaging shifted. Gosh, it feels like almost overnight, from everyone's going to get this, you just need to not get it all at once, to do not get this, never ever get this, you should not be getting this, we have to make sure that nobody gets this, as few people as possible get this. And it became less of a thing about not overwhelming the healthcare system and just a thing about stay locked down indefinitely because you cannot get this. It even got to such a point where we started shaming individuals for getting the virus. I remember when Herman Cain, the late Herman Cain, passed away last summer. He was a accomplished, wise black man who allegedly attended, a Trump rally, and he later passed away, allegedly with C19. And I saw more than a few news articles, basically shaming him because he was of a certain political ilk, because he was allegedly at this venue. I don't know whether he was masking or not. That is really kind of irrelevant right now. It became a thing of like almost repeating what happened during the HIV epidemic in the 1980s, this idea of like shaming people for getting sick. And it's just really funny how we shifted from we're all going to get this eventually, but we can't all get it at once, to no, don't get it. Do not get it. Even if you're young and healthy and you are at a very low risk of negative outcomes, do not get this. We have all basically for the last 13 months been treated as though we are 85 years old and 400 pounds. And look, I disagree with that at this point. I'm sorry if that is too frank, but I disagree with that. I am not necessarily for treating people differently based off of their health status and having different tiers of how we treat people based on their health status. I think that is problematic as well. But look, if we're going to continue saying we're in an emergency situation, we're in this pandemic, which I don't necessarily believe. I believe the numbers indicate we are fastly approaching herd immunity. We are fastly exiting emergency status and pandemic status. But if we're going to continue fear-mongering and saying, no, this is a dire situation, then maybe we do need to look at treating people differently based off their health status. Not mistreating them based off of their health status, but treating people who have a very high risk of negative outcomes of this differently than we treat, a 25-year-old who just wants to get back to their life, okay? I'm sorry, that's where I'm at right now. And I want to share with you, apart from changing the definition of herd immunity on the WHO website, Fauci himself has kind of changed his whole, he's been very reticent to give numbers of what exactly constitutes herd immunity, what percentage of the population. But he recently has stopped recognizing, just like the WHO did, has stopped recognizing natural immunity as having any basis in herd immunity. And back in December of last year, he basically admitted to the New York Times when he sat down with an interview for them that he had originally been saying 60 to 70% of the population needs immunity in order for us to reach herd immunity from COVID. In December, in that interview, he admitted, look, I said that because I knew that the population was really reticent to take shots, and I didn't think they were ready for the truth. And the truth is that we need probably 85, 90, 95% of the population to be immune. And again, he's considering immune to be vaccination. And Dr. Vinay Prasad, again, who I mentioned earlier, he wrote this piece, Why Did Fauci Move the Herd Immunity Goalposts? And he starts off by saying he's very, he has a lot of respect for Fauci, but he's highly critical of him for doing this and for also admitting it. He said late last week, and again, this was in December of last year, Fauci told the New York Times that new science has changed his thinking on the herd immunity threshold, but he also admitted that his statements were influenced in part by his gut feeling that the country is finally ready to hear what he really thinks. Specifically, and that his gut feeling that the country is finally ready to hear what he really thinks, that's a direct quote. Specifically, the fraction of people who would need immunity to SARS-CoV-2, either through vaccination or recovery from prior infection, but again, Fauci no longer recognizes that latter, to extinguish the spread of the virus was initially estimated to be 60 to 70%. In recent weeks, Fauci had raised the percentage from 70% to 75%, and then to 75%, 80%, and 85%. Allow me to quote verbatim from the article titled, How Much Herd Immunity is Enough? This is still Dr. Prasad speaking. But now I'm going to go into what Fauci said in the article, the New York Times article. When polls said only about half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%, Fauci said. Then, when newer surveys said 60% or more would take it, I thought, I can nudge this up a bit. So I went 80, 85%. So Dr. Prasad goes on, the two undeniable omissions in the Times articles are one, Fauci is to some degree basing his statements on what he thinks the public will accept and to what degree his rhetoric might help vaccination efforts, and two, he openly admitted it to a reporter from the New York Times, and that is really stunning. And then Dr. Prasad goes on to say, it's not the first time Fauci has done this. Obviously, in March of 2020, he famously sat down with 60 Minutes and said no healthy individuals should not be wearing masks everywhere like they do in Asia. His words, not mine. And then we later found out that was allegedly because he had been concerned about protecting PPE for those who really needed it. So which is it? Did he really think at the time, no, we don't need to be wearing masks? And if so, why did he think that? Or was he essentially lying to us because he was trying to control the public behavior, and he thought, if I tell them this, if I tell them the truth that we should be wearing masks, they're going to buy up all the masks and use up all the equipment we have. Neither one is really great. Neither one speaks very highly of Fauci, but Dr. Prasad goes on to say, why this is kind of problematic for a scientist, let alone the most respected scientist in the United States, allegedly, to be doing this kind of thing. And he says, I believe that in 2020, scientists and public health experts can only report the complete, unvarnished truth as they believe it to be. We cannot and must not attempt to distort our ideas in an effort to generate responses we think might occur. I hold this position for 4 reasons. 1, the information gap no longer exists. Experts are not inherently smarter, more analytical, or logical than members of the lay public. Perhaps in the past they preferentially had access to certain types of insider information. In the modern world, however, due to the internet, this information gap no longer exists. 2, it is not an easy game to play. Human beings are masterfully complex and not easily predictable. Fauci's messaging in March may have been intended to prevent a run on masks, but it also may, to some degree, have contributed to masks becoming one of the most polarized issues of 2020. So, are we going to continue to blame that on one individual who's no longer in office, or does Fauci hold some of the blame for that? Does the CDC hold some of the blame for that? Those are my words. Dr. Prasad, and in many quarters, fostered a deep suspicion and distrust of Fauci. Admitting openly that you are selectively presenting your view of the herd immunity threshold based on your reading of what the public is ready to hear, and the way in which that percentage might affect vaccine uptake, is a bold and unprecedented statement. I'm not a fortune teller, so I cannot imagine all the possible consequences, though I fear loss of trust and a promotion of conspiracy theories is one. The truth is that scientists are not trained to predict what people will do with varying pieces of information in an effort to optimize outcomes. As such, the safest path is to always and only present the truth as closest to the real views in your heart and mind. Number 3, loss of trust is incalculable. Once it is revealed that an individual has presented information selectively to get a listener to change their behavior, this person will forever be viewed through that lens, i.e., a calculating person. Is Fauci telling me this because the science supports it, or because he believes it, or because he thinks hearing it might motivate a behavioral change on my part? Personally, I don't see a way back from this situation, and this is still Dr. Prasad talking. The moment the public believes that you might be withholding, selectively presenting, or distorting information to get them to behave a certain way, they will immediately put your comments through a translator. Trust is irrevocably broken. A new spokesperson is needed. And lastly, number 4, distortion steals power from the people and gives it to a scientist. In a prior column, I argued that follow the science, which is what I quoted from earlier in the video, is an incoherent message. That's because science can tell you what might happen in varying scenarios, but science cannot tell you what to value. Science is necessary for sound policy, but it is not sufficient. Human beings voicing their concerns and priorities in concert with scientific guidance is required to shape policy, and policy fundamentally belongs in the realms of politics and in the public square. This means that scientists must not distort their view of a situation to get you to do the right thing, because this robs you of your ability to decide what is the right and just and virtuous course. A scientist must always and only and indefatigably tell you the scientific truth as best they see and understand it. But we all, every last one of us who votes and participates in society, we alone get to decide what the policy should be. So then I went straight to the source, straight to that New York Times article, How Much Herd Immunity is Enough, I believe is what it was titled. And it's the one that Dr. Prasad was referencing in his op-ed. And I found this quote from Dr. Mark Lipstitch, an epidemiologist at Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Lipstitch says, even if Dr. Fauci is right and it will take 85 or even 90% herd immunity to completely stop coronavirus transmission, we can still defang the virus sooner than that. We don't have to have zero transmission in order to have a decent society. We have lots of diseases like flu transmitting all the time, and we don't shut down society for that. If we can vaccinate almost all of the people who are most at risk of severe outcomes, sorry, I get excited, then this would become a milder disease. So I just thought that that was very interesting. There are lots of doctors and scientists, again with this idea of follow the science, there are scientists and doctors who disagree with Fauci for various reasons. And why are those people, silenced and censored and shunned? And going with this idea of there are diseases like the flu, there are viruses like the seasonal flu that we just live with in society. A lot of scientists believe that coronavirus or C-19 is going to become endemic like the flu. It's never going to go away completely, and it's kind of just going to be something we have to live with. And that doesn't mean that we stay shut down forever and we wear masks forever and we do all these measures forever. It means we behave kind of in the way that we behave during cold and flu season. Frankly, I'm going to be honest, I did not realize until recently how many thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people die from the flu every year. And I am not saying that to say that that is comparable to C-19, that we should have just been letting it rip since the beginning and totally just done whatever. But those people, there's people who are vulnerable to poor outcomes from the seasonal flu. And it is true, we don't stop society. We offer the flu shot every year, free of charge, and we encourage people who are at high risk to take advantage of that shot. We hopefully, inform the public about the flu and what you can do to protect yourself, but we don't control people's lives and shut down society and ruin people's businesses for it. And is that where we're getting to with C-19? Is it something that we're just going to have to kind of live with the understanding that, look, certain people are at a much higher risk of negative outcomes of this, and those people we have to support them in taking care of themselves. And honestly, I hope that if I have the blessing of growing old in my life, or if I have the burden of growing sick before I grow old, I hope I'll still feel the same way. I understand that I have incredible empathy for people who are at a high risk of negative outcomes of C-19. And I understand that it's easy for someone to stand over here and say, well, I would do this differently and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not blaming those people who are at high risk for our lockdown measures. I'm blaming public health officials and elected leaders. But I would hope that I would feel the same way of, look, it's my responsibility to take care of myself. It's my responsibility to talk to my doctor and to take care of myself. It's not everybody's responsibility to change their behavior because I myself have a weakened immune response. And I've said it before, the two people I love most in the world have not necessarily the strongest immune systems, and they agree. They want to be able to make their own decisions. They don't want other people to be making decisions for them. They agree. So again, I'm not blaming any subsect of the population, but I am just saying I believe the cure has now become worse than the disease, and we maybe have to deal with the fact that this is here to stay, and that doesn't mean that we mandate masks forever, or we social distance forever, or we live in isolated bubbles forever, or we force everyone to get the shot. This might be here to stay, and we might need to deal with that in the similar way that we deal with the seasonal flu. I want to share with you a little bit from two articles. The first is titled 5 Reasons Why COVID Herd Immunity is Probably Impossible. And I quote, The threshold is generally achievable only with high vaccination rates, and many scientists had thought that once people started being immunized in mass, herd immunity would permit society to return to normal. Most estimates had placed the threshold at 60 to 70% of the population gaining immunity, either through vaccinations or past exposure to the virus. But again, we know that Fauci and the CDC aren't necessarily recognizing past exposure to the virus right now. But as the pandemic enters its second year, the thinking has begun to shift. In February, independent data scientist Yu Yanggu changed the name of his popular COVID-19 forecasting model from Path to Herd Immunity to Path to Normality. He said that reaching a herd immunity threshold was looking unlikely because of factors such as vaccine hesitancy, the emergence of new variants, and the delayed arrival of vaccinations for children. Gu is a data scientist, but his thinking aligns with that of many in the epidemiology community. We're moving away from the idea that we'll hit herd immunity threshold and then the pandemic will go away for good, said epidemiologist Lauren Ansel Myers, executive director of the University of Texas at Austin COVID-19 Modeling Consortium. And then they give several reasons of why, it looks like we may never reach herd immunity. And one of them is that it's unclear whether vaccines prevent transmission, which is something I've spoken about before. The key to herd immunity is that even if a person becomes infected, there are too few susceptible hosts around to maintain transmission. Those who have been vaccinated or have already had the infection cannot contract and spread the virus. The COVID-19 vaccines developed by Moderna and Pfizer, for example, are extremely effective at preventing symptomatic disease, but it is still unclear whether they protect people from becoming infected or from spreading the virus to others. That poses a problem for herd immunity. So again, it's not just this thing of this group over here who's not following the rules and won't just follow the rules no matter how much it harms them. They are the problem for herd immunity. They're the problem. There are other factors at play here. And then really quick, one more article from the same site, again linked below like always. This article is titled, "The Coronavirus is Here to Stay. Here's what that means." I quote, "In January, Nature asked more than 100 immunologists, infectious disease researchers, and virologists working on the coronavirus whether it could be eradicated. Almost 90% of respondents think that the coronavirus will become endemic, meaning that it will continue to circulate in pockets of the global population for years to come. A large study of people who have had COVID-19 suggests that their level of neutralizing antibodies, which help to block reinfection, start to decline around 6 to 8 months later. But their bodies also make memory B cells, which can manufacture antibodies if a new infection arises, and T cells that can eliminate virus-infected cells, says Daniela Weiskampf, an immunologist at the La Jolla Institute for Immunology in California, who co-authored the study. It's yet to be established if this immune memory can block reinfection. Although cases of reinfection have been recorded and new viral variants may make it more likely, they are still considered rare." So I just thought that was interesting that over 90% of these 100 immunologists, virologists polled do think that we're headed towards, if not already there, coronavirus 19 becoming endemic. So something that never goes away and comes back around in different pockets of the population at different times of the year. And that might just be something we have to deal with. And are we going to stay, shut down forever? And again, with this idea that we don't know how long immunity lasts from natural infection, this article suggests that it is 6 to 8 months. But then the body, the amazing body, has memory B cells and T cells that can manufacture new antibodies if a new infection, possibly a new viral variant, occurs. So there's just so much that we don't know right now, and I don't think it is appropriate for us to even be talking about shot credentials. It is completely illogical to think that these tell you who is safe to be around and who's not safe to be around. We just don't know that right now, and it is not right to be telling people, look, you're a bad citizen if you don't get. I honestly read an op-ed this week that said that. I quote, it is a bad, it was something, I'm not quoting because I can't quote it verbatim, but it was something to the effect of, you're a bad citizen if you don't get your shot. I'm not even a researcher or a scientist, and I've already presented really valuable information that you can follow in the links below and look at yourself for just different ideas and different questions to have, as opposed to this idea of, oh, everything is just black and white and bad citizen, good citizen, common good, not common good, right, wrong, black, white. I mean, it is absurd. It is absurd. Shot credentials are the wrong road to go down. And I appreciate this person for leaving a comment that was not personally attacking me or suggesting that I'm being selfish or ignoring the dangers of a pandemic, but admittedly, this person also did leave those kind of comments. So last comment that I just want to address real quick, because I think it's important. I think it's another one of those things that kind of are out there. They're not in secret, but it's not highlighted by the media. It's not highlighted by public health officials. So the average person who's not weird and obsessed like me is not going to find it necessarily. It took me a long time to kind of realize this and put this two and two together. And that the comment was that the FDA has authorized Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. This was obviously left before J&J was pulled in the United States. And I just want to be really clear that being FDA approved is different than being approved by the FDA for emergency use authorization. And I found this article titled "Why FDA's Issuance of EUAs, Emergency Use Authorizations, Are Not Approvals and Why That Matters." Now, this article was published on the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society page. It was published in April of 2020. I don't think an article like this would be published now, because it would be, it would at the very least be censored, because it would be like encouraging vaccine hesitancy, allegedly. But this criteria still stands. Like, this has not changed just because we want more and more shots in arms. And I'm quoting, "The type of review that FDA conducts for an EUA, an emergency use authorization, is also considerably less rigorous than how the agency would normally review a product for an approval. Typically, we think of FDA authorization as meaning that there is data and information that in the agency's view shows the product is safe and effective for its intended use. For example, to approve a drug, FDA must determine that there is, quote, substantial evidence consisting of adequate and well-controlled investigations that the drug will have the effect it's intended to have. An EUA, on the other hand, can be authorized if, quote, it is reasonable to believe that the product may be effective," end quote. The EUA standard is simply a lower standard, and everyone should understand that. That is still quoting from the article, but it's not quoting from, the FDA. And I just wanted to include that in there in case you don't understand that. Hopefully everyone kind of knows that by now. I think it's become a little more mainstream than when I first had this interaction with this individual and when I first had this idea, to kind of go through the comments in my videos. But yeah, just so you're aware, I'm not telling you not to do anything or what to do with that information, but you should be aware that it is still in clinical trials. It is not as rigorous of an approval. Someday it will probably become FDA approved. I have no doubt about that, but it is not currently. So I do believe that people are justified in having hesitancy. And I don't believe that showing me J-Lo getting her shot is going to change people's minds on that. It's very bizarre and condescending. And lastly, I just wanted to share, as I was researching for this video, I did find out this article, which was actually just from yesterday, April 19th, at the time I'm filming this. And it was about how Chile, who actually has one of the highest rates of vaccination in the world, is now experiencing a real uptick in C19 cases. And I'm going to quote from the article. "Almost 40% of the South American country's total population have now received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, according to statistics compiled by Our World in Data, reflecting one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. Only Israel and the UK, respectively, have inoculated a larger share of their population with at least one dose. Nonetheless, Chile has endured a sharp uptick in coronavirus infections in recent weeks, even with its world-renowned vaccine rollout and strict lockdowns in place for much of its 19 million inhabitants. The Pan American Health Organization's regional director has since emphasized that for most countries in the region, vaccines won't be enough to prevent rising infection rates. I cannot stress this enough. For most countries, vaccines are not going to stop this wave of the pandemic, Carissa Etienne, director of PAHO, said during a weekly press briefing on Wednesday. There are simply not enough of them available to protect everyone in the countries at greatest risk. And then the article goes on to state that possibly the uptick in infections is because Chile has been predominantly using CoronaVac, which is a shot developed by China. And probably not surprisingly, there's not a lot of public data regarding their trials of that shot. It's not really available to the public, so it could be based off of the shot that they're using. We don't really know. And I share all of that again with great hesitancy, because I don't want to share anything and then it causes people to say, oh, well, let's stay locked down forever then. Let's stay locked down indefinitely. Let's continue to mask indefinitely and continue to mandate these things and continue to isolate individuals to their own, mental health detriment. So I am not sharing that to encourage that we continue to frankly ruin people's lives indefinitely. I am sharing that though so that we can understand, and hopefully it's a jumping off point for your own research if you've not already done it, that the shots may be wonderful. I applaud Western medicine. I applaud science. I applaud people who are far more educated and brilliant than I am. And also, we are not there yet to be talking about shot credentials. We are not there yet. This is probably a wonder of modern medicine, and yet still, there is still so much that we don't know about it. And it is wrong, possibly, to be investing so much time and so much resources and so much energy into expelling disinformation and getting the word out there to people that they need to get this shot, and encouraging them with celebrities and influencers and that kind of thing, when we don't even know if this shot is protecting against C19. I'm gonna say it again. Yes, in Chile's case, it might have been the shot they were using, or maybe it's the new variants and all that kind of thing. So again, I ask, are we just moving to a place where we have to just live with corona? And I say that not to be insensitive or discompassionate to someone who maybe has a higher risk of negative outcomes than I do. I am not trying to do that. I value every single life. But because of that, because I value every single life, I value every single life. I value the people that we've lost to suicide. I value the people who've lost their livelihoods, their businesses that have been passed down from generation to generation. I value, a livelihood is part of what makes up a life. It is. And it's not right what's happened here. I value the people who don't want to die alone on their deathbeds. I value people who want to be able to pursue their dreams, people who need to be around other people, people who live in homes where abuse and addiction is present. And so just telling them to stay home because it's safer for them is completely and utterly incorrect and insensitive. Because I value every life, I have to value every life, and not just the lives of those who are at a higher risk of negative outcomes of COVID, and which we haven't done a good job of protecting anyways. So I think that is it for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. I'm excited to maybe transition a little bit out, branch out a little bit, and talk about something other than C19 and the shot credentials. I know there's a lot going on, and I have a lot to say. And in the meantime, remember to speak your minds.